When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, and welcome back to the Grease Comedy YouTube channel. In today's video, we are going to be talking about the idea of, did the Maesters kind of create a lie on how the dragons kind of died out to kind of take some of the blame away from them? Because there's this whole idea that the reason that the dragons end up dying out, or at least in the history books and all the way the Maesters kind of tell of it, is that because the Targaryens kept them in captivity in the dragon pit and such, they became smaller and they kind of started becoming decrepit, basically. So all the dragons are coming out deformed. And I kind of want to talk about that whole issue because I think there's a little bit more going on there, right? So I'm going to kind of talk about in this video how we can have some modern examples, maybe talking against this. So we have Daenerys and her dragons. So we're gonna go through this entire idea. But let me know before we get into the actual video. Do you guys think that the Maesters kind of used that to kind of cover up things they were doing, whether that was poisoning the eggs, whether that was poisoning the actual dragons themselves, whether that was doing some sort of sketchy stuff? But yeah, so before we break down and I give you more of my reasoning, if you guys like to like, subscribe, and comment, please do it up, share, and grow our channel. I might like this content as well. And let's get into the video. So my first point here is going to be, let's take a look at Daenerys. So Daenerys' dragons, if you believe the theory, basically, that her eggs were actually from Westeros, they were stolen, and they've been in Essos this entire time, really, right? So for like the last, 150 to 200 years, they've really been in Essos. They haven't been in Westeros. They haven't been touched by the Maesters, which is, for me, a big signaling of that's why they were able to hatch. Right, because look at it. Westeros, after a certain point, right, I won't get too deep into it, but after a certain point, when a Maester is in actual control of the Seven Kingdoms around Aegon III's reign, there's just no more dragon eggs that are hatched, and we don't really know why, but it comes suspiciously right after a Maester was in control of the realm. It's a little suspicious. So the idea here is that because these 3 dragon eggs are left by themselves, the Maesters couldn't get to them, they didn't really know where they were. These are the eggs that eventually hatch with Dany. And if we look at Daenerys, from the very beginning, right, it's already said that Drogon is going to be bigger than both of her other 2 dragons. Or if we even, note that Drogon at the time of the last book is notably bigger than Viserion and Rhaegal, you could almost say maybe it's because they're in captivity, because she does put them in captivity, but I would like to counter that point with going with they were already smaller than Drogon, right? And the thing is, they're still being fed quite a lot, and now the problem is they stop eating at a certain point, which is not good. But I just think the idea that the dragons just died out because of this whole idea of they were kept in captivity just doesn't really make any sense to me, right? Like, yes, and if we even see it with the dragon pit, right, it makes sense, like, over time, like over generations of dragons, that maybe they would get a bit smaller, but it doesn't make sense to the degree of them being like a dog's skull, basically, right? That doesn't make sense to me. There's something logically that had to happen that the Maesters were doing, whether that was poisoning the dragons somehow by maybe poisoning the food in the dragon pits, or poisoning the actual eggs themselves somehow or another, these dragons were coming out super small. Because it just doesn't make any sense, right? Like, how would these dragons so quickly from a turnaround, like, if you think about it, like, Vhagar was a dragon not 50 years before all the dragons basically stop hatching and Andor gets really small and die out. So the whole argument that, oh, because they're kept in captivity, they become smaller and they died out, really feels like, to me, as the Maesters trying to create some sort of explanation as to why these dragons all of a sudden just stopped growing and hatching. Like, if you just look at it from a logical point of view, right, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, right? It doesn't. And if you guys want to watch, I have a lot more explanation as to why the Maesters would be involved with the dragons. But if we even look at it from Marwyn, right? So Marwyn the mage basically tells Samwell that, who do you think killed the dragons the first time? So the thing here is, if you look at the Dance with Dragons and the lead up to it, and even during it, the Maesters are involved with a lot of sketchy things. They push a lot of agendas. The Maesters are very much linked to the High Towers, who end up being the main kind of force behind the Greens in the Dance with Dragons. The Maesters are quite involved heavily in kind of the war against magic and the Targaryens as a whole. It makes a ton of sense for them logically to get rid of the dragons. And they have to have some way of covering it up for themselves so it doesn't look unusual or suspicious. So that is kind of why it's written in these texts that, hey, the Targaryens did it to themselves. They're the one that locked up all these dragons in the dragon pit, and they didn't let them go into the wild. And again, I'm not saying that that wouldn't have an effect on them, because being in captivity would have an effect on them, but not as dramatically and drastically as we see it with how the dragons end up dying off, right? It wouldn't happen like that or to that degree that quickly. It would be something where we could see it over like hundreds of years. Slowly, you would really start to see the difference. It just doesn't make any sense. And if you even look at the dragons that were like, you know, younger during this time period, a lot of them were kind of dying off because of war, because of this or that. There was a lot of exterior reasons as to why a lot of dragons weren't coming into like full maturity. So that is kind of what I wanted to talk about in this video. I would highly suggest, if you're more interested in this kind of topic, to watch my Maester Conspiracy series. It's kind of an outdated series. I want to do another one eventually, especially when we get past House of the Dragon, get through it. So that could be, you know, years from now, but maybe after season 1, I'll go back and redo it. But I think it's really good. I think the concept and the actual supporting evidence I do give for it is pretty good. I think it still holds up pretty well. So if you're interested in this type of content, I would go to that. I didn't give all of the reasoning, all the background leading into why the Maesters would want, or how they could even get into power to destroy the dragons, basically. But yeah, I would definitely watch that if you were interested. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you guys think about the Maesters and with the dragons and their ability to be kept in captivity. How much do you guys think that affects them? But yeah, thank you guys all for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.
If you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention.